The time that we are going to express is the time we live in.
You want a building to speak of its time.
Speak in a vocabulary that's clearly and distinctively their own.
We're building new things which are about our future.
We're here today to design for the next generation.
These buildings are about the future and about expressions of our time.
In the early period of federal architecture, you saw a particular style that embraced certain ideals, certain principles of quality, of understanding of the human experience, and expressing those in a way that really reflects the ideals of our culture. Through a host of means in the 70s and 60s, that began to change dramatically, and we then began to look at federal architecture really as about expediency.
It was wonderful when it was done by talented people, but it could also be cloned by untalented people in buildings that just seemed to be endless punch card facades and repetitive, boring things.
The greatest dilemma that faces contemporary architects is the need to make architecture that is knowable and readable and understandable by the public.
When I served as chairman of the design awards jury, we just could not find a project worthy of the award, so we did not give any new buildings an award. As it turned out, the previous jury, led by Hugh Hardy, had not as well.
It was almost impossible to talk about high design standards with the crop of stuff that was there. We all found each other saying, well, why couldn't federal architecture have the high standards it once did? We didn't see these buildings beloved in 50 years, people bothering to restore them to their original appearance. We saw them disappearing in 50 years.
Before the Moakley Courthouse in Boston went out for qualifications from architects, I remember Justice Breyer saying to me, well, how are we going to attract good architects? I'm really worried we won't get anybody.
We wanted to make this selection process that would make it perhaps more attractive for architects who might otherwise not think about government work. What we wanted was a person who was concerned with design in the broadest sense to bring that perspective to bear on a new project. The Boston Federal Courthouse project is the link between the GSA Design Excellence Program and prior federal design undertakings.
The big idea in Boston is that every courtroom should be visible from the outside of the building and from the main space on the inside of the building. The sense of accessibility, of the transparency of the system of justice, that's what the courthouse is about.
Years ago, you had to put the whole team together before you could even be considered. You have associate architects, your engineers, your minorities, your women-owned. I mean, you had to spend a fortunate time trying to put together a team that might look better than any other team.
It seemed possible to reverse that process. If you believe that the architect was the key person in everything that happened with the team, establish the credentials and the point of view and the ideas and the approach to the problem of the designer. And that, of course, is what eventually did take place.
Those were very exciting, hopeful times for those of us who were involved. I was there for the very first meeting, what was eventually named the Design Excellence Program.
Our main objective was to identify the lead designer, the individual that would conceptualize the idea for the concept and then be able to carry it through to its completion.
The framework and inspiration for the Design Excellence Program are the guiding principles for federal architecture, authored by Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan back in the first year of the Kennedy administration.
One of the rules was that we should avoid an official style. We should seek to do what was the contemporary architecture of the time.
The guiding principles said that there should be no official style, and that federal architecture should reflect the vigor, dignity, enterprise, and stability of the federal government, and that they should incorporate art as a complement to the architecture.
The other thing that was very important was to level the playing field, making it less expensive for individuals and for firms to compete. That enabled us to increase the number of firms that were able to pursue our projects and improve the general quality of the designers pursuing our projects.
It's really elevated the whole awareness of what's possible by engaging some of the most outstanding practices in America.
That has led to a highly competitive condition amongst architects seeking buildings of this type, because they recognize that the opportunities for producing significant architecture are there.
The whole architectural community was incredibly positive about the program.
What interested me was the recognition that this was a program that clearly looked to architects to achieve excellence in design. There was an intention to create buildings in which the government could be proud and which symbolized a change of attitude about building of government buildings.
Today, the young designers are scurrying to the federal projects to work on them because they know that there's going to be an interesting project. That's a huge endorsement. There's something happening here, and that something is really quite good.
It's important that we constantly try to find ways and to bring new and contemporary thinking. And the government's role in this is fundamental.
How does one convey the sense of dignity, the sense of power, without necessarily using classical language? One could use classical language, but once one deviates from that language, how do you do that? How do you give the stature that must be in a public building like a courthouse? How do you give shape and form to that?
If you think of a government building, you think of columns and rotundas. And we abstracted those elements in the Los Angeles Federal Courthouse in a very interesting way, with both the rotunda being a solar wall. So there's kind of a reference to it, but it's not literally a classical rotunda. The judges' chambers are columnar expressions, so it reflects a kind of columnar portico. It's actually functioning, inhabited portico. There's an interesting kind of play between innovation and tradition.
It's important to go back and talk about the humanistic values that are involved in architecture.
Light really informs architecture.
Light and natural ventilation means low energy buildings, means bringing changing light down to the occupants of the building, to people who visit the building. The building is constantly changing.
I would love a chance to ask first the young artists who are willing to get into the skin of the intention of the architect, but extend the vision of the architect by what they do.
The new security constraints that are come into federal building are potential enrichments and extensions of how you can interpret architecture. Once you understand the limitations, it should allow us to invent a vocabulary which not only solves the problem, but also aspires to an architectural image that is appropriate.
The border station is a really interesting program. How do you elevate that program into something more than just the mundane that it appears to be? It must welcome people. It's about, securing the borders. I love that kind of thing.
The competition process also helps us to identify new and emerging talent, people who would not otherwise go for our work.
I've been really lucky to have just an extremely diverse group of projects. I prefer the competition process. I think it's the only way you get a level playing field. The focus shifts from personality and presentation to the work.
There is something about design competitions which, to me, is refreshing because it focuses on what you believe should be done. The competition transmits what you can do. Springfield was a design competition, and this was the beginning of a renewed relationship with GSA because we then pursued ATF, we pursued Mobile.
The private sector peer system, the National Register of Peer Professionals, is the cornerstone of the Design Excellence Program.
In a bureaucratic circle, there's not always the desire or incentive to make a brilliant decision. There is a huge incentive not to make a mistake. The whole Design Excellence Program and the peer reviewing really allows government to make and then validate the brilliant decision.
My key contributions are bringing the unique voices in architecture to the process, getting them into the process, not having them taken out immediately because they don't fit the criteria of what architecture should be, but looking at what architecture can be. And making a distinction between firms that deliver a product that is a building and voices that deliver a building that's a work of architecture, which to me is what design excellence is about.
When I was asked to be a construction excellence peer, I found that the architects and construction managers were struggling with what was the best process. I believe that I was able to head them in a correct direction. You're part psychiatrist, part parent, part construction peer.
The GSA has done a remarkable job incorporating quality within the architecture of federal buildings.
I hear the other architects give their comments, and I said, yeah, that's a great idea. It's nice to see architects, instead of competing with each other and trying to down each other, come together and help each other to get better product, better projects, and better quality.
Striving for that spirit of openness and dignity is enormously important. This is what really gives us pride and makes landmarks.
Every building should have a freshness to it. If you get that, then you communicate to people that the federal government is evolving, just as the system of justice is evolving, and that it's responsive. These buildings are here to serve people, not to overawe them or make them feel small and insignificant.
It has to give us something back. It has to speak to us, lift our spirits, sing.
Architecture is part of a cultural conversation across time. All throughout history, public architecture is the most important architecture there is.
It would be a very sad commentary if at this point in our democracy we decided to skip over and suggest through our architecture that we were not here.
The goal of what you're doing today has to be that people are so impressed by what was created today, 100 years from now, that the greatest debate they could muster is how do we make that contemporary without losing the spirit of its time.
Millions of people will enter this building in the years ahead. Some as lawyers on behalf of clients, some as litigants or witnesses, probably scared to death, some as jurors, some as new citizens of this country, some as merely visitors. My hope is that all those who enter here will leave secure in the knowledge that justice is open, illuminated, and makes room for everyone.